In 1873, a man sat alone in a dark office in Lower Manhattan. No bodyguards, no lawyers present, just him, a single oil lamp. And a list of names, each name on that list belonged to someone who had dared to stand between him and total control of America's railroads. By the end of that year, every single one of those men was either bankrupt, publicly humiliated, or completely removed from the industry. His name was Cornelius Vanderbilt, and this is the story of how he didn't just build an empire, he destroyed every empire that got in his way. Cornelius Vanderbilt was born in 1794 on Staten Island, New York. His family was poor. His father ran a small ferry across the harbor, and young Cornelius worked on that ferry from the time he could walk. By 16, he had borrowed $200, a massive sum back then, and bought his own boat. By 18, he was running his own ferry business, undercutting every competitor on the water. He was ruthless from the very beginning. When a rival ferry operator started charging lower fares to steal his customers, Vanderbilt didn't panic, he didn't negotiate, he simply dropped his own fares to nearly nothing, sometimes even free, until his competitor was hemorrhaging money. When the rival finally surrendered and begged to be bought out, Vanderbilt had already spent almost nothing. That was his method. That was always his method. Through the 1820s and 1830s, Vanderbilt expanded his shipping empire across New York Harbor. He earned the nickname Commodore, a military title he never officially held, but that people gave him out of a strange mix of fear and respect. By the 1840s, he controlled more waterways in the eastern seaboard than any single man in America. But Vanderbilt saw the future before anyone else did, and the future was iron. In the 1850s, railroads were becoming the single most powerful force in American commerce. Whoever controlled the rails controlled the movement of goods, passengers, and wealth across the entire nation. Vanderbilt watched this transformation happen in real time, and in 1858 he made his move. He quietly began purchasing shares in small railroad companies across New York State. Not loudly, not publicly, he bought in the shadows, piece by piece, like a spider weaving a web that no one could see, until it was already complete. By 1867, Vanderbilt had taken full control of the New York Central Railroad, one of the most important rail lines in the entire country. He did it by buying shares through intermediaries, through secret partnerships, through financial maneuvers that were so complex that even the other investors didn't realize what was happening until Vanderbilt already owned them. He then turned his attention to the Erie Railroad, and this is where the real war began. The Erie was controlled by a man named Daniel Drew and his two associates, Jay Goode and Jim Fisk. These were not small players. Drew was a financier who had built his own fortune through manipulation. Goode was a genius, a cold, brilliant strategist who would later become one of the most feared men on Wall Street, and Fisk was the loud, flashy enforcer who kept the operation running through intimidation and bribery. Vanderbilt wanted the Erie. Drew, Goode, and Fisk were determined to stop him. What happened next became known as the Erie War, and it was not fought with guns or armies. It was fought with money, stock, manipulation, bribery, and psychological warfare on a scale that America had never seen before. Vanderbilt began purchasing Erie Railroad shares on the open market, pouring millions of dollars into the stock. His goal was simple: buy enough shares to gain controlling interest and take over the company. But Drew, Goode, and Fisk fought back with a weapon Vanderbilt did not expect. They simply printed more stock. Millions and millions of new Erie shares created out of thin air, flooding the market and diluting Vanderbilt's investment. It was illegal. Everyone knew it was illegal, but no one could stop it fast enough. Vanderbilt kept buying, Goode kept printing. The battle raged through the New York Stock Exchange like a financial hurricane. Vanderbilt poured an estimated $10 million into Erie stock, a fortune that would be worth over $200 million today, and Goode kept creating new shares to absorb every single dollar. Then Goode made his most desperate move. He bribed New York State legislators openly, brazenly, to pass a law that retroactively made all the new Erie shares legal. the cost of that bribery was reported to be over $1 million. $1 million spent to legalize fraud. Vanderbilt finally pulled back. He had lost millions. The Erie War was, by every financial measure, a defeat for the most powerful man in America. But here is what history forgets. Vanderbilt did not lose his power. He did not lose his empire. He simply shifted his focus. And within 2 years, he had recovered every single dollar he lost and then doubled it. Meanwhile, the men who had beaten him in the Erie War tore each other apart. Fisk was murdered in 1872 by a man he had personally wronged. Drew died nearly broke in 1878, and Good, the brilliant Good, spent the rest of his life paranoid, isolated and feared by everyone around him. Vanderbilt had lost one battle, but the war he won. When Cornelius Vanderbilt died in 1877, he was worth $200 million. At that time, that amount represented roughly 1% of the entire GDP of the United States of America. One man, 1% of an entire nation's wealth. He was, without question, the richest person in America, and possibly the richest person in the world. He left almost all of that money to his son, William Henry Vanderbilt, and William did not squander it. Within 8 years, William doubled the family fortune to $400 million. The Vanderbilt dynasty had become the single wealthiest family in American history. But what did Cornelius Vanderbilt actually leave behind beyond wealth? He built a railroad network that connected the industrial heartland of America. He modernized transit. He created jobs, millions of them, and yet he did all of it by crushing anyone who stood in his way. Competitors were financially destroyed. Business partners were betrayed. Entire communities were harmed by the monopolistic control he maintained over rail lines. He was not a villain in a simple sense. He was something far more dangerous. He was a man who understood power better than anyone alive, and who had absolutely no hesitation in using it. Cornelius Vanderbilt did not need armies. He did not need weapons. He needed only money, patience, and the cold understanding that in America, the man who controls the rails controls everything. And if you stood between Cornelius Vanderbilt and that control, he would not move aside. He would simply make sure that you disappeared, financially, professionally, completely. This was not business, this was war. And Cornelius Vanderbilt never, ever lost the war.